I'm gonna real quick go ahead and mute everybody. It's not that I don't want to hear you talk. It's just very distracting if you do. Do this real quick and we'll get started. All right. So yeah, I'm Jason. I'm an alcoholic. I appreciate you guys letting me speak to you tonight. If it goes bad, it's because I'm wearing the suit and tie, and that's all because of Steve. So it's a little bit strange. I know I see how Greg felt now. It's a little bit strange doing this from my house instead of just being in front of you in a normal meeting. So I hope everybody's staying safe, and I hope this will pass. So we can get back to meeting in person and carrying our message to the alcoholic that's still suffering. So tonight I'm just gonna go over, what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm not originally from this area, but I am originally a North Carolinian. So I grew up in Asheville. Grew up in a trailer up there. I was my parents, loving parents. I wasn't beat or nothing. Just a loving environment. We were poor, but they were good people, and they still are good people. And so the thing though, when I was growing up, they're very religious folks, and my mother had her father was an alcoholic, and there's quite a few alcoholics that are in my family. And so we didn't have any alcohol in the house. And, that didn't really, I didn't really think anything of it until I got, until I became a teenager. When I was 15, that was when I had my first sip of alcohol at a buddy's house. I think it was a Zima. I don't even know if they still make those things, but the minute I took a sip, I was hooked. I really liked the feeling that it gave me, and it just sort of progressed from there throughout high school. I would kind of rely on alcohol as a way to, I don't know, give me courage, I guess, or socialize, you name it. That was kind of my thing, and it also helped me too, because around that time, you don't really think about being poor when you're young, but as you become a teen, especially, I started really to resent my family for that. There was a lot of opportunities that my peers got to have that I didn't really get to have, and so that resentment sort of set in, and I would rely on alcohol to sort of take me away from that, take me away from the reality of my hand in life. So began to go to parties and stuff like that on the weekends, and then ended up getting a fake ID so I could have a more steady stream of alcohol. I was still living with my parents, so that was the one thing that sort of kept a control on my drinking at the time, was just the fear that my mom and dad would find out what I was doing, and especially with my mom's, with her father being an alcoholic, just the disappointment was something that I didn't want them to see, or I didn't want to see from them. So I would go off. A lot of times I would drive around drinking, just so I wouldn't be caught at the house, or I'd go out to parties. My first brush with law enforcement was my senior year of high school. I was at a party. There was about 300 people there, and I had had a brownout. And last thing I remember, I was partying, and the next thing I remember, I had about 3 Asheville police officers standing over top of me. Got issued a citation for underage drinking, and the officer at the time drove me home in the squad car, woke my parents up, and so that's how they that's how they came to find out that I had started drinking. That was a fun night, I tell you. I don't think anybody, even especially now as me as a parent, I can't imagine getting a knock at 2 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning, and having a police officer standing at your door with your kid. But that's how they found out, and I just, that made me, so the solution for them was to to pray about it and sort of pray away my alcoholism. And I know, like probably many of you in this room, I'm very hard-headed and stubborn. And so, being told that I have a problem, or, being told that I need to stop drinking or pray it away, that didn't really sit well with me. So that just made me resent them even more, which, so I kept drinking. And, like I said, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so when I finished high school up, I wasn't sure if I wouldn't be able to afford to go to college. So I ended up going to community college on a Pell Grant. I was still doing pretty well in school at the time. I was a functioning alcoholic, I guess, if you will. I'd keep my partying mostly to the weekends at that time, and just, binge drink myself to a blackout over the weekends. But then still make it into class on Monday. So I made it through my associate's degree, and, right before I finished up with my associates, I got pulled over for driving while consuming under 21. I blew a .07 at the time, so they couldn't get me with a DWI, but because I was underage, they got me with, driving around and drinking. And, so I had to do community service, and, in my alcoholic mind, I'm just, I rationalize it as, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, just a case of bad luck. Didn't really put the two and two together that, maybe it had something to do with the fact that I was drinking in excess. But made it through that, and managed to get accepted to NC State. I got in to go to computer engineer as a computer engineering major. So come that August of, that was 2004, I moved down to Raleigh. Right around that time, September of 2004, so August of 2004, I moved down to Raleigh. September of 2004, I turned 21. And that was pretty much it for my studies at NC State. I was skipping class, and, I built this whole beer wall in the dorms that I was staying in. And, just drinking every day. I showed up to an exam drunk. I remember coming in an hour late. The professor looking at me like, what are you even doing at this point? So with that program, computer engineering is not easy. Most of the folks that were in it would spend, 8 hours a night, 8 hours a day on a weekend working on homework. And that was not me. I was the guy that would go out and party and hang out with the business majors and the communications majors and have a good time. So by the end of that first year, I was on academic probation. Academic suspension or probation, something. Anyway, they wouldn't let me come back in the fall, so I had to take 6 months off. And so I did that. Didn't really do anything to address my alcoholism. And then I came back in the spring of 2006 and just fell right back into my old habits, was drinking again. And so was failing classes. I think it was around March or April. Was failing classes, and had gone out drinking with a friend, and came back to the apartments that I was staying at and got stopped for a DWI. And it was actually one of the times that I wasn't drinking. I had a roommate that drove my car back, and he had walked into the apartment, and I was still stumbling around outside, and the campus police officer cited me with that, and so that got dismissed later on at court. But at that point in time, I was so depressed and distraught about the fact that, here I was failing again. I was about to be kicked out of the university, regardless of what happened with the DWI. That a few weeks later, I got on a bender and decided it would be a good idea to kill myself. So I swallowed I found as many pills as I could, swallowed them all, and kept, everything I could find. Was drinking hard liquor. I was drinking, I think it was 150. Wild Turkey 151 was always my drink of choice, because I could just I could really escape reality with that with that concentration of alcohol. So so I don't know. At some point during that night, I had sent a message to an ex, and I don't know if it was, divine intervention or just a cry for help or what, but she called the EMTs, and they came to campus, and the same officer that had arrested me for the DWI was the same one that responded to me for the suicide attempt. And so they pumped my stomach full of charcoal, and you would think that after that, maybe it'd be kind of a wake-up call, but I was still so depressed at the situation that I was in that I kept drinking even after that. And so I got kicked out of NC State, but like I said, my DWI got dismissed, and so the only thing that I could think to do, and I was just so depressed and beating up myself, and so the only thing that I could figure to do, I figured if I was going to be a failure, at least to do something useful with my life. So it's 2006. We were still in Afghanistan, and Iraq had just kicked off. So I figured I'll join the Army. At least maybe that'll give me a purpose. And I'll be honest with you, I still wanted to die. I didn't see any point in living. And I figured that if I was going to die, at least I would die honorably and do something on a deployment and maybe get shot. I don't know. So I joined the Army, and ended up in Italy as my first duty station. I joined as an infantryman. So I went to Italy, and within 2 or 3 months of being in Italy, we deployed. And let me just say this too: the Army was good for me in terms of giving me a purpose and putting a roof over my head and sort of taking care of my financial issues, but it wasn't so great in terms of getting me sober. I mean, the folks over there were drinking like a fish, so it was like, oh, okay, well, everybody's drinking like this, so fell right back into it. But like I said, 2 or 3 months later, I was in Afghanistan, up in the northeastern part of the country on the border of Pakistan, near the tribal area. So if you know anything about that war, that's where most of the insurgents were coming over those high mountain passes. And we were at this little base down in a valley. And I say this because it leads into something else, but where we were at, we were getting shot at every day, in firefights every day. I had patches of my hair turning white. I had, all of us that were out there, losing weight. And we had a psychologist come out at one point and said that was the most combat stress she had seen out of any platoon. It was 30 of us out there in this little camp. So we're out there, and, I stayed out there. It was a 15-month tour. And I stayed out there for 12 months before I took my first. So you get mid-tour leave. And so I stayed out there for 12 months before I took my mid-tour leave. And when I took my mid-tour leave, I came back to Asheville. And I tell you, the stress of that is beyond, the stress of combat is beyond anything that I could really have imagined as a 23-year-old. Um, so when I came back after being there for almost a year, I went back to what I knew, which was alcohol. I came back. I was pissed off at the world. I came back and, everybody's still living their lives. And I couldn't understand that. Like, it was hard for me to reconcile that. I had friends that were complaining about, the traffic. And I'm just sitting here thinking, well, at least you're not being shot at or blown up, and that's the kind of stuff that was going through my mind. A lot of anger, a lot of resentment. And so I went back to drinking. So about 2 days before I was supposed to go back to Afghanistan, I decided I'd start drinking early that morning. It was 10 a.m., I think, is when they opened the pub in Asheville. And so 10 a.m., I started drinking at the pub, and I don't remember anything that happened until about 2 days later. So from the police report, I had driven from Asheville down to Raleigh, and at about 2 a.m., 1 or 2 a.m. on the next morning, I crossed over Glenwood Avenue and struck a vehicle head on in the other direction, doing about 60 miles an hour with my lights off. I snapped my femur in half and broke the leg of the guy that I hit. So when I woke up a few days later, my mom was sitting next to me in the hospital at Wake Med, just bawling her eyes out, and told me that there was police outside the door, that I had hit somebody, and that I couldn't leave, that they were going to keep me there up until the point that I could walk. And after that, I was going to be transferred over to the Wake County jail. So they had charged me with felony assault with a deadly weapon, felony serious injury by a vehicle, and a whole bunch of misdemeanors, more than I can even keep up with. So I was, that's a lot to take in. So at that point, I was just trying to keep my head above the water. I couldn't believe what I had done. I swore I was never going to touch alcohol again. I was freaking out because I didn't know what the Army was going to do. I had to get in touch with the people back in Afghanistan to let them know I wasn't coming back. So that accident set into motion a whole chain of events. For me, I had to sign out of my unit there, sign into Fort Bragg. When I got to Fort Bragg, the hospital there wanted to check and see what they had done to my leg because, I eventually posted bail. So then all that stuff happened when I had to go sign into Bragg and everything. They wanted to see what had done, what the doctors at Wake had done to my leg, and then the civilian courts were saying that they weren't going to cede control of the case to the military. So that meant that I had to go back to Wake County to the Superior Court there. So it was this whole thing. And, I was at my wit's end. And you would think that would have been the thing that really, settled it for me, that got me sober. But that wouldn't come till later. So I signed into Bragg, and, I met my commander there, explained everything that had happened. And, the doctors at Womack didn't think I'd be able to serve in the Army anymore because they had put a titanium rod through my femur. And, for the job that I was in, I was jumping out of airplanes and doing all kinds of carrying stuff around. And the surgeon there didn't think I was going to be able to do it. So while I was there, I stayed sober. I tried to do the best that I could in my job. And like I said, I was a pretty high functioning alcoholic beforehand. And so I worked my ass off, basically. I ended up helping the people that I was staying with. It was a replacement company, so they managed the people coming in and out of the Army, in and out of that post. And I ended up helping them develop a program that would shorten the in-processing time of soldiers from 2 weeks down to 3 to 5 days. It ended up saving the Army about $14 million at that base and then at the other bases around. And that was the thing that saved me. I was working till 10 o'clock at night, and my commander saw that, and she basically said that, if you can, manage to not be in jail for more than 30 days, we'll let you stay in the Army. And they all wrote recommendation letters on my behalf. And so my court date was in December of that year. And I went before the judge, and the family of the guy that I hit, he had mercy on me. And so they agreed to it. I pled guilty to the felony charge, and I was sentenced to 30 days in jail, 4 years probation, and I had to pay $15,000 of restitution. So I went back. I was ecstatic because the max penalty for that was 6 years in jail. And we honestly weren't sure if, when I left the courtroom that day, whether it would be in handcuffs or whether it'd be going back to the base. So left there, went back to my unit, explained everything that I did and or everything that had happened, and they agreed to keep me in. And so at that point, I was working during the week and doing my jail time on the weekends and trying to pay back all that money that I owed. So that kept me sober for about a year and a half, just the trauma of that accident. And I bring that up because, in the big book, it talks about self not being able to fix self, or I believe my sponsor said that. But anyways, I was certain in my mind that because of that wreck that I would never touch alcohol again, that I'd sworn it off, and I wouldn't go back to it. And that's what I did for about a year and a half. And then the memory of the accident started to fade, and I was getting ready to deploy again, and decided I would go down to Myrtle Beach, and I think 11 o'clock that morning had a drink. And then the next thing you know, I'm drinking and driving on my way down to the beach with another guy to go party, and right before we deployed. So attempted to pass a guy on the passing lane where it's got the broken lines, and I couldn't get back over before the lines went back to solid, and had the police in Robeson County pulled me over and cited me with a DWI. And so, and I tell you, the grace of God, we'll get to it later, but I just, to survive the deployments that I've been on, to survive the wreck, to even not be in jail today, speaks volumes to the power of God, or higher power, whatever you want to call it. But I'll get to that in a bit. So got cited with the DWI, and had to go back through the Army's substance abuse program and convince another commander that they should let me stay. So we were literally 10 days out from a deployment. And that's kind of what that and my first sergeant. So they needed me on the deployment because I was a team leader at the time. And then my first sergeant was a member of AA. And so when he found out what had happened, he ended up approaching me. And, really at that point, that was the first time that I was ready to listen, to accept the fact that, okay, you know what? I tried it on my own, didn't work. And again, I believe that things happen for a reason. So he was in the right place at the right time for me to be ready to hear, what he had to say. I had been to AA before, and I'll tell you, the one in Asheville, it was a bunch of 60, 70-year-old men that were smoking and cursing. And as a 20-year-old, that was not for me. I was like, I am not anything like you people, and you're never going to see me back in here again. And it's funny because I talk about that in the book, because they're laughing. You're going to be back again, whether you know it or not. So I was back, First Sergeant Harvey was his name, William. and he became my first sponsor. We ended up going on that deployment. They deferred my court dates so I could do the deployment and come back. And so while we're on the deployment, I was working through the 12 steps with him. And yeah, that's kind of where where I was before. I was a very self-centered, resentful person. I like to place blame on other people instead of taking responsibility for my own actions. And, that's how I got down that path. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and wants to be an alcoholic. For some of us, it's a gradual process. And then next thing you know, you end up like me, or, like some of the other folks, just in a bad spot. So now I want to talk about the good stuff that happened. So that's the beauty of this program. You start off with the bad, and then when you work these steps and you commit to this program, then the good things start happening in your life. And so I worked the steps with my first sponsor. I came back. I still had to go to court, and I was worried that I would be thrown in prison because it was a direct violation of my probation. My parole officer had said, look, our probation officer said, look, the only way you're not going back to jail to do this time is if the judge in Robeson County says that this is not a violation of your parole. So hired a lawyer, and again, by the grace of God, I don't know if the judge just didn't know what I had done before, but they put that in my court document, in my sentencing document, that said this is not to be considered a violation of his parole or probation. And I took that back to my PO, and he said, okay, well, let's keep moving. So I started going to AA with Will, and started working through the steps. That was I want to say this too. Steps 1, 3, and 6 were the hardest things for me to do. Admitting that I was powerless over alcohol, I fought that tooth and nail. I just didn't like the way it was phrased, to be honest with you. But when you get to a certain point, you realize it, that, you know what, I can't control this. When I drink, I can't control it. That was for me. It wasn't that I couldn't, I guess, stop myself from drinking. It was that the minute I drank, that's when I was powerless. Because then it just turned into 20 drinks and I'd be, on the side of the road somewhere. And then, 3, turning my will over to God, or my higher power as I knew him. That was another hard part. I, as a soldier, and all the stuff that I'd lived through in Afghanistan, I had even growing up in a religious family, I had a belief in God. I believed that there was a higher power that was keeping me alive, especially through all the stuff I'd been through. It was just that I didn't want to let go of this one little piece of my life. I didn't want to give him this part, this alcohol, because it was the one thing that I felt like I could control. And, clearly I couldn't control it, but, that was the one thing I didn't want to give up. I felt like giving that up was kind of like admitting defeat. But now looking back, I wish I had done it a whole lot sooner, because it would have made life a whole lot easier for me, I think. And then, getting rid of all those defects of character, that was another one that had took me some time to be ready for that. But so I started down that path, and then within a few months, I met the woman that would eventually become my wife. And I knew she was going to be my wife because at the time, my sponsor was the only person that I had told all this stuff to, that I had been completely honest with. And then Donna came along, and I met her, and I decided, I still couldn't drive at that point. I took a train ride from Fayetteville up to Raleigh, where she was staying, to meet her. And because I hadn't told her yet that I couldn't drive because of this DWI. So I got up there, and I was staying the weekend with her, and she was the second person in my life that I told everything to. And she said, okay, well, I can deal with that. And to me, that was when I knew. I'm like, well, if you can put up with all that, then I think you're the one. And tonight's pretty special for me because tonight's actually our 7-year wedding anniversary. So it's neat that I get to be sharing this story the same day that that we got married. So so things, I'm telling you, things. The minute I started with this program, things started to fall in place and things started to make sense in my life. And it took time. It took time to get rid of, all these bad habits. And it wasn't easy. Like, there were plenty of times in that first year or two where I would have gone back to drinking in a heartbeat if it hadn't been for my sponsor and for the AA group. But, having her in my life now, and having my sponsor and having AA was really what kind of got me through it. And I think that's the great thing about this program is that it helps us sort of, you start to replace bad behaviors and, not even bad behaviors. You replace that reliance on alcohol with other things, especially your higher power. When you get to the point where you can rely on your higher power, instead of jumping into a bar or grabbing a drink or grabbing a fifth of 151, that's an amazing thing. And that's when you really get to see your higher power's will, see his will for your life sort of manifest itself and see him start working through you. So a year later, we ended up getting married. I ended up having to go deploy to Kosovo. And shortly after that, it was a 9-month deployment, came back. And right after that, we were pregnant. She was pregnant with my son. And, and that changed a lot of things too for me. It was just such a blessing when he came along. I'll be honest with you, I didn't think I was going to live past 30. And then, here I am now, with a child, with a dog and a beautiful wife. And, it was just fantastic. My work was going well for me. I was staying involved with AA and, I don't know. Things really were starting to come together. And then, so around that time, I think it was 2013 or so, my wife encouraged me. One of my biggest regrets was not finishing my education. And I honestly thought, with the felony and with all the stuff that had happened, that nobody would take another look at me. No self-respecting school would ever take another look at me. But she encouraged me to try to go back. And so I really wanted to go back to NC State to finish what I had started. And it happened that there was a program that sort of fit what I was doing with the military. And I applied. And honestly, by the grace of God, they saw something in me to let me back in. And so it took me 3 years. And then, next thing I know, I'm finished up with my bachelor's. And then, then I came down on orders to go to Saudi Arabia. And I figured, well, while I'm over there, let me do something else. And ended up going on to get an MBA. The book talks about it. It's just, for me, it was amazing to see that all the things that I thought would never happen, that I thought I'd given up years ago because of my drinking, that God just started opening these doors. And I swear, it was literally like one after another. Things would be opening, and it wasn't because of me. There wasn't nothing that I could have done, to have done that, to have those opportunities present themselves. So I went, I went to Saudi Arabia, came back. I was fortunate enough to buy a house while we were out there. And we bought our house here in Seven Lakes. And I'm so thankful for that. Like I said, for someone in my background to own a home, to have a steady job where I've been promoted and have done well in spite of my past, and to have all these blessings just showered on me, that was all God. And this program, honestly, because if I was still in my selfishness and my drinking, none of this stuff would have happened. So I came back, moved here. I joined the home group here. My sponsor, William, had moved to New York. So, I tried to work that for a little while I was here. But shortly after getting back from the deployment, I realized, that you got to have a sponsor. And I want to bring this up too. I don't know if I even told you guys. So did I tell you guys my sobriety date? It was, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Sobriety date was 28 November 2011. So going on, what is that now? That's going on 8 years and some change. But even for me now, having that amount of time under my belt, you got to have a sponsor. Doesn't matter, I think, how long you've been sober, just having that person that you can trust, to lean on when you need it. It's critical to this program. They're a sounding board for you. They can help you get outside your head when you're having these thoughts. They can help you, and Will was great. We worked through each step together, but coming down here, I wanted to have one in person. So I got a sponsor with the home group with Primary Purpose. And, it's just been amazing since I started working this program. And one of the other things, and I share this with you guys, I tell you, God's timing, it's just amazing. So I guess, what was it, Tuesday night or Wednesday? I forget when. Tuesday night, Tim asked me on the fly if I would come and speak here. So one of the things that I've always wanted to do, growing up, and then even after getting sober, was to go to law school. I wanted to be a lawyer to help the people like me that, and probably many of you, there's a lot of folks who get wrapped up with the criminal justice system that don't have a lot of money and that need access to good legal advice. But again, that was one of those things like, well, this is a pipe dream because I'm a convicted felon, for one, and there's not a whole lot of folks that would probably let me into the legal profession. But yesterday, at about, I want to say 10 or 11 a.m., I got accepted to Elon School of Law. And I'm also waitlisted over at UNC Chapel Hill School of Law. UNC Chapel Hill, it hurts my heart as an NC State fan, but that's still my that's still my primary goal. So I'm going to try my best to convince those folks that that's where I should be. But either way, I tell you what, God is amazing, and this program is amazing. And if you turn your life over to him or her or whoever you're, and that's the other thing about this program that's so great, that I had this concept of God when I was growing up, and my concept of God is completely different today. The concept that I had growing up is not good for my sobriety, not good for a whole lot of anything, but the one I have today is a loving, understanding God that I can communicate with, that accepts me for all my faults. And like I said, I mean, when you tap into that, things just happen, man, I tell you. And I'll tell you right now, I don't know, even going to law school, it's no guarantee that I'll ever be a lawyer because I still have to go in front of the bar examiners. But I'll tell you right now, just from what I've seen, the stuff that has happened in my life and the doors that have opened, just having trust in him, for me, there's nothing that my higher power can't do. And so I think we're getting close here. I just want to thank all of you guys for for letting me share tonight. And if you're a newcomer, all I can say to you is that, you know, it took me years to really appreciate what I have now and really appreciate this program. At the at the onset of it, all I wanted to do was get sober, and then as I kept coming back and keep coming back, you start to you start to grow, doors start to open. The closer you get to your higher power, I mean, it's just night and day from where I was when I started this program to where I am today, and that's all because of my higher power, my sponsor, and this program. So with that, I appreciate your time, and I'm going to turn it back over to the main group.